And I we set out on a university.
Hello, everyone.
So yesterday we were at
For your patience, and welcome to the Center for International Development's Road to GEM24 event. GEM, the Global Empowerment Meeting, is CID's flagship conference where changemakers from academia, government, business, civil society, media, and philanthropy will gather on campus to share insights and develop action-focused strategies and solutions. The Road to GEM hosts important conversations with practitioners, researchers, and changemakers during the months leading up to the annual meeting. The focus for GEM24 is gender, with a particular focus on barriers that are being faced by women and girls in developing countries. And Road to GEM programming provides opportunities to learn from leaders on the front lines of gender-related work in developing countries. We kicked off this past November with an off-the-record conversation with former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and earlier this semester with Evie Maxman, CEO of Oxfam America. I'm Shikha Daya, a student at Harvard Kennedy School. I look forward to today's discussion on women's empowerment in the face of regression and resilience, a close look at Afghanistan. The format for today's session is a 30-minute presentation with around 20 minutes of Q&A. Before getting started, I would want to mention a few housekeeping items. Given that this is a hybrid event, we will be taking questions from both in-person audience and our virtual audience. We are also recording today's sessions, but we will keep the camera on the speaker, so only the voice will be recorded in the session. The video of this event will be available on the CID YouTube channel afterwards. Please use the QR codes located across the room to check yourself in. This helps us to track attendance and cater for future requirements for planning for the future events. Please make sure to subscribe to CID's newsletter to learn more about our offerings and opportunities weekly. Our next Road to GEM event is celebrating International Women's Day on March 7th. And join us for a conversation with Fatima Madhabayo, First Lady of Sierra Leone, over lunch and cake. Now, without further ado, let me briefly introduce our speaker for the day, Ambassador Adela Raz, who served as the last ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the United States. Prior to that, Ambassador Raz served as the first female ambassador and Permanent Representative of Afghanistan to the United Nations. At the UN, Ambassador Raz was the Vice President of the 75th session of the General Assembly and was also appointed by the President of the UN General Assembly to serve as the coordinator on COVID-19 related issues. Before her arrival at the UN, Ambassador Raz was the Deputy Foreign Minister in Afghanistan. She began her career with the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan and continued to work in a variety of other international development positions across the world, mostly in US and Afghanistan. Ambassador Raz holds a Master of Arts degree in Law and Diplomacy from Fletcher School at Tufts University, and a Bachelor of Arts with honors with triple major in International Relations, Political Science, and Economics from Simmons University in Boston. She also earned a certificate in International Development from the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Thank you so much all for coming. Thank you so much for Ambassador Adela.
Thank you, Shaikha, for this really kind introduction, and of course, thanking the Center for International Development for giving me the opportunity to come here, and the public policy program, Women in Public Policy program, and as well as the Women in Defense, Diplomacy, and Development. To have me invited to come to Boston and to the Kennedy School, I always say The city gives me the nostalgia, as you probably heard. I have spent 8 years of my life here, 8 beautiful years, youth. And every time I land in Boston, it is the love affair is as raw as I first had arrived. So really, thank you for making it happen. When I was invited and I started to speak with Caitlin, where is Caitlin? And we both discussed and say, okay, what do I have to talk? And the first reaction I got was extremely intimidated, because when I was told I have to speak for 30 minutes. And I said, my God, 30 minutes with educated students where they're brilliant, they have all the information they need. What could I share with them that could be new and interesting? And honestly, it's not a joke. So I am intimidated. Help me out. But I started to decide to share my personal story and my experience of growing up in Afghanistan in the midst of conflict and some really hard challenges as a woman. And then how I walked the journey of power and the face of regression, and of course, resilience. I did grow up in the beautiful city of Kabul. I remember the city's dark blue sky and its heavy snow in the winter. Kabul is known for its great weather. When King Babur first arrived to Kabul, he fell in love with its landscape and its beauty. But despite the richness of the country that has to offer, a good part of my childhood memories is dominated by war, surviving attacks, and struggling for safety, shelter, and food. I distinctly recall the moment I grappled with the concept of peace and war. For the first time, it was during my first grade year when a delegation from the Ministry of Higher Education at the time made a visit to our school. And they were seeking students' willingness to share their thought on peace. Despite feeling the surge of nervousness and intimidation, I raised my hand. I stood before the class and the visiting delegation, and the memory of a recent tragedy weighing heavily on my mind. Just a short while before, a classmate of mine had lost her life in a rocket attack in front of the school. It was the tragic experience that shaped my understanding of peace and understanding of the concept of war. With a trembling voice, I said, peace means to me not losing a classmate. Reflecting now, I realize that it was the childhood experience of so many young children in Afghanistan, part of my generation, irrespective of our gender. We were forced to confront the harsh realities of conflict at the very early stage, which left, of course, a very undeniable mark on our formative years. Looking back, now I realize that despite the war, one thing that really kept me together and gave me hope was the pursuit of education, which for some may just seem a gifted or a granted right, but it is not back at home where I grew up. As a girl, I was still among the very few fortunate ones to grow up in a family where, despite the turmoil and conflict surrounding us, education remained a cornerstone of our life. Being the eldest daughter among my siblings with 3 brothers, I recognized the profound value of education, particularly through the guidance of my father. Even at a very young age, his words resonated with me, and he said, and I still remember, he said, education is a wealth that no one can ever steal from you. Yet while education was important in our family, but gaining it was really, really difficult. The Civil War initially disrupted my access to schooling, and later, during the oppressive regime of Taliban, my right to education was outright denied. The Civil War in Afghanistan pushed my family, like many other families, into a constant state of displacement. The relentless search for refuge and safety forced us to relocate frequently. Between the grades of 1 and 4, my family relocated at least 8 times. And I remember, and for some of us who come from South Asia, our grading system at school is very different, which means you have to really fight hard to get the first grade at school. And I remember every time I would work hard to be recognized among my classmates that I'm studying hard and I would get the first grade, but then we had to move to the next school. And then I would be again an unknown student among everybody who had to work hard. So that was my memory. And then came after the civil war, it was the repressive regime of the Taliban for the first time when they came to Afghanistan, which imposed a complete ban on my education for 5 long years. During those times, I still tried to continue to learn in the so-called secret homeschools, which were run by brave women. So I remember during those very difficult years, early years of my life, one thing that helped me to shape my thinking and stand committed and resilient was the influence of a strong female role model. And for me, that was my grandmother. Throughout those challenging years, my grandmother emerged as a guiding light in my life. Though she hailed from an era where formal education was inaccessible to many women, but her wisdom suppressed any academic knowledge. Born in Kandahar, she exemplified strength and resilience. And despite her lack of formal education, she possessed unparalleled wisdom gained through life's experience. She held authority over her 5 brothers, and that's pretty hard in a family when you grow up in Kandahar. And assuming the role of a decision maker within the household and serving as a beacon of leadership for our family. She was a role model to many in the family, including her sisters, her daughters, my mom, and eventually her grandchildren, myself included. I remember when I first received a scholarship to study in the US back in 2004, I was worried to share the news with my uncles, thinking they might just try to prevent me from coming here. I had never traveled overseas then, and flying to the US was quite a daring task to do. I distinctly remember the afternoon when my mother finally had the courage to share the news to my family. Anticipating resistance from my uncles, we both were prepared. And she and I had raised ourselves that whatever it comes, we had to respond. Yet, to our surprise, it was my grandmother who interjected, first responding with genuine excitement and saying, wow, this is a fantastic news. And then she said, well, you're going to be the first woman from our family who would go abroad and study at the highest level. And that moment, I remember I watched as my uncles who had seemingly had prepared to voice their objection and saying, well, how could you do this as a woman? But my grandmother's support, it really held a very undeniable strength and authority, and they couldn't say anything. From her, I learned the invaluable lessons that have shaped the core of my character. She implanted in me the importance of taking strong stand when I'm right, holding my values very high, and never giving up. She taught me not to underestimate my capabilities because of my gender, because that's what the society always told us. We're women and we have to act differently. Central to her influence was the remarkable way she commanded respect and authority. It wasn't just about speaking up and doing so. With clarity, conviction, and compassion, she stood for the values she believed. In essence, she optimized authentic leadership on one that inspires and empowers others to strive for excellence. Yet perhaps the most profound lesson she taught me was the art of adaptability within the framework of cultural values. Despite societal norms that taught us to confine her potential and the potential of so many other women, she challenged them. She carved her path with grace and dignity. Her ability to navigate cultural expectation while remaining true to her principles always served as an element of inspiration for all of us. So therefore, having someone to admire, to draw motivation from, and to connect with on a personal level is extremely important. As a mother raising 2 daughters, I always grapple with the challenge of finding suitable role models for them. Despite I named them after 2 queens in our part of the world. I named one Gauhar Shah, and Gauhar Shah was a queen in Afghanistan who built the first girls' school in the 5th century. And the second one, Noor Jahan, as you may all know, one of a very prominent queen that the first in Islamic civilization, the first coin was printed after her name. So I'm just trying to encourage them and motivate them as much as possible to fight and stand strong. But it's extremely important in the context of Afghanistan as well, because the local context carries relevancy. And I think that's important when we are, no matter where we live, role models and looking up to women always inspires us and gives us hope and aspiration, but the local context is extremely critical. The other element in my life was really the importance of women supporting one another, helping them to break the barriers built for us, challenging the measures we are compared to, and consolidating solidarity within women leaders as allies. Following the collapse of the Taliban regime post 9/11, there was a concerted effort by the international community towards women's empowerment over the following 2 decades. Despite facing countless challenges and setbacks, remarkable progress was made across various sectors, including politics, education, and the economy. However, what truly played an important role during those years were the Afghan women themselves, who had shattered the barriers and really opened the doors for so many young women, including me. Their accomplishments, their reputation, the earned respect served as a powerful catalyst for many young women, myself including, inspiring us to aim for higher goals, both in our career and of course in the politics as well. While there were for sure strong women leaders outside of Afghanistan, I often felt that through their achievements, the connection was really hard. Because we always said that women in Afghanistan, their challenges is different than women outside of Afghanistan. But let me tell you the truth that later in life, when I was walking through my career path and the leadership path, I started to realize one thing, which is extremely common, I think, among women leaders from across the world. There is a certain level of leadership when you arrive. Your barriers are the same as a woman faced here in the US, or in Afghanistan, or in South Asia, or Middle East. It's the same thing. I have to tell you a story. I was the deputy foreign minister in just my first month. And I was going through a lot of tough time inside the office because I was the first woman to really hold a position among male colleagues, and I never had a deputy foreign ministers before as a woman. And it was one of the symposiums, we had colleagues coming in from Europe. Next to me was sitting a delegation from Europe. And this was a very prominent young woman from Europe with leadership role. So I sat next to her, and when we talked, then she was asking me how I'm doing. And I said, well, you know what, it's a little challenging. And it was extremely interesting. As soon as I started to share what I'm going through, all the experience was the same. She was also the only woman. She would go to the leadership meeting as one woman sitting in the meeting, and the type of barriers she was facing. And I think at that moment, I started to realize and value the importance of allies and women allies and lessons learned. Because if you remember, there was an article that came in Washington Post, and it was during the Obama administration. There was a group of women inside the administration that had a challenge to speak up their mind and the president, because as soon as they would say something, they would be constantly ignored. And that's very common for women when you are working in a very male-dominant space. So the technique or the trick that they had learned, and later on I started to use the same way, was that they would ally with their female colleagues at the meeting. And then once one would say something, the second one would just not even like agreeing or not agree, but expressing the agreement and say, that's a brilliant idea. And the third one would say the same thing, and the fourth, and then the president will notice and he will come up and say, acknowledging, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Because usually if we propose an idea, it's just an idea. But if the same idea is proposed by a male colleague, usually it's acknowledged. So I think that building alliance with your female colleagues and female leaders. I also held various firsts for women in Afghanistan, which included as a first woman, the deputy spokesperson to President Karzai at the time, the first woman deputy foreign minister, the first Afghan woman ambassador to the UN. But holding these positions, I noticed that women are often measured against higher standards of quality and competencies. As the first woman within career paths, if we make a mistake, the mistake weighs on our entire gender. And as many will say that the mistake you made is because you are a woman. Therefore, for me, being able to prove my capabilities beyond my gender became an important element at every step of my career. I ensured that I could play a pivotal role in opening the doors for the next generation of young women, enabling them to step forward, learn, and continue the journey that countless women before me had never had the opportunity. Yet, at the midst of this progress and empowerment, it's with heavy heart now that I find myself standing before you, compelled to acknowledge a stark, dark reality overshadowing my story. As I reflect upon the milestones of my life and so many other women, I'm aware of the disheartening truth unfolding in Afghanistan right now. The hard-won advancement made since 2001 now stagger on the brink of collapse, plunging the nation into a new era of darkness and despair. The very freedom that countless women fought bravely to attain milestone are pushed back and confined to their homes. I always say it was a privilege and honor to be the first Afghan woman to become the ambassador, and always referred as the first. But I wasn't expecting to say I will be the last one too. It has been more than 2 years since the Taliban shattered the aspiration of women, banning their education, their career, and even access to public spaces. It's painful to contrast my previous role as the Ambassador and Representative of Afghanistan, highlighting the hard-fought progress made by the country. But now speaking about the challenges and the marginalization of Afghan women in the society. It is a sad tragedy that we must bear witness to the resurgence of a regime that seeks to abolish knowledge and opportunity for girls across Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the only country on earth that girls' education is formally banned after 6th grade. Once again, women are denied the fundamental rights to education and forced to their homes. Their voices are pushed to be silenced and their dreams are to be shattered. And it is simply, it's not even within the Afghan culture, as I shared my story of my grandmother, of who she was and the way she inspired and aspired us as a woman leader. And it's not even in our religion to ban a woman from education. It's really simply the fear that Taliban have, because they have seen what women could do and were able to do in the last 20 years with the opportunities that arrived and how they progressed. And today, the entire system is working in a way that pushes women not only from the forefront of the society, but they're thinking so long-term to completely dismantle their existence as a source of change, because that's what they are fearful of. In this unfolding tragedy, Afghan women find themselves suffering simply because their gender. So for me, I think what is really unfortunate to say that there is a regression on women's rights globally. Among the most striking example, of course, Afghanistan is the hard and the most difficult example to reflect on. But before the fall of Kabul, as many of you know, there were still challenges, but there were progress. For instance, in the education level and enrollment had increased. Girls going to university, there was more than 100,000 women who were going to universities. There were about 27% of the total congressional body were made by women. Women ambassadors, women ministers, women deputy ministers, and the judiciary system. And now it's a complete ban. No woman in the civil service, no woman in the higher education sector. Universities are closed. And our entire judiciary system has been abolished in terms of we do not have any more an attorney general's office, because as a woman, you do need a defense lawyer, a defense system, and that does not exist. There is only one court that makes a decision, and it's completely run by men. But what this regression means for us in the US and globally, I think it's a trend that has started. The reaction we face or we feel with the case of Afghanistan, it's the constant pushback that we get as Afghan women that this is okay, make peace with it. This is how authentic Afghanistan usually look like. And what is really sad that level of acceptance being pushed on us to accept it, we see the replication happening in every part of the world. So my call is always, don't take things for granted. The rights that even constitutionally was granted to us, and they're seeing it in this country too, it's shaky. And what it really calls is an awareness, an information, and a threat. And for me, what I always question recently is all the mechanism we have built globally and internationally. There have been a lot of treaties that have been signed. We have the WPS agenda. We have crime against humanity. We have gender-based crimes, and none of those legal entities that we have, or institutions or principles that we have created that one day will come and protect the rights of women has been not exercised, and we're not using it. The case of Afghanistan, for the first time, we're trying to challenge and tackle on it, but believe it or not, until this moment, we haven't been able to get a hearing with the ICJ or any of these international mechanisms to look into the crimes that are happening in Afghanistan towards women, how to label them. And one of the campaigns we have started it, and I'm not sure if you were aware, we were calling for gender apartheid in Afghanistan. And the truth and the honesty is that I also acknowledge if it took for South Africa more than 7 or 8 years to criminalize racial apartheid. So for gender apartheid, it will take twice of that time, maybe. But it's very, very sad that even some of the member states, when we speak with them, or countries we speak with them, and say this is not a legal term, we don't recognize it, so technically we can't even use the word. And I think that's exactly where acceptance of what is happening in Afghanistan is happening, that we're trying to normalize it. And the normalization is where the fear for so many of us who are up in the front and complaining is that if we normalize what is happening in Afghanistan, it will not stay in Afghanistan. So the question is, what can we do, or what can be done? I think this question is critically important, and to combat the regression of women's rights globally and to stand in solidarity with those directly affected by such setbacks is essential to underscore the importance of individual and collective action. First, ensure you do not remain silent. Silence is complexity in the erosion of rights. Regardless of one's country or origin, living in a society that protects women's rights is never guaranteed. And as we have examples nowadays everywhere, we're also part of a global community, and it's our moral imperative for those who cannot. Awareness and vocal opposition to injustice can drive change, making it crucial for us to use our voices to highlight and challenge the suppression of women's rights. Get involved as agent of change. Become active participants. This involvement goes beyond running for office or engaging in political activism. It involves the responsibility to stay informed about global and local issues affecting women's rights. Education plays, of course, a pivotal role in this endeavor, and its denial is a crime. Educating ourselves and others is a vital tool to disrupt ignorance, challenge extremist agendas, and foster a community that values and fights for the right of all members. In a conclusion, I have a call to all of you. And my call is, you are the leaders of today and tomorrow. I won't even say tomorrow, even today. And you have the power, and you will be out there making change. We live a lot of times in a bubble where our information is limited to what we have and what we have access to. But while you're here, this is the best spot on earth to be at the Kennedy School, where you have access to everywhere. Technically, the world is coming here. So my humble opinion is, please really make sure that you don't only you don't take the current process for what is happening as just being a natural path towards a world that that naturally is changing in a better way, because out there, if we look around, the rise of authoritarian regimes, the rise of populist regimes, and as well as the acceptance of women's right denial as it is becoming more larger and stronger. So my hope is that you stand up and you call for a change, and a change beyond boundaries, and a change that impacts not only the lives of today, but the lives of tomorrow as well. And I also hope that you stay connected with the case of and the issue of Afghanistan. Of course, we do live in a complicated world. When the fall of Kabul happened, nobody knew that there will be another world complex challenge. And then following that, it was Ukraine, and then the Middle East and Gaza and Israel. And all of them are equally important, but that's exactly where things are triggering. One leads to another. And a friend of mine said it really nicely, and I want to repeat what she said. She said, in Afghanistan, what happens in Afghanistan, it never stays in Afghanistan. It moves out. And this is what history has taught us. We learned in the 90s, post-Soviet invasion, and when they left Afghanistan, we thought, well, things are fine, and we walked away, but that was a mistake. And I think we saw this happening again, and my hope is Afghanistan never falls into the hands of a terrorist regime, but either we are happy or not, there is a regime in Afghanistan that has a stronger ties. So keep informed, keep connected, and please do not forget, especially the voices and the calls of Afghan women, that today we have the opportunity to be educated, but none of them are. So thank you so much. I look forward to your questions, and my intimidation was not baseless. Thank you.
We are now going to open the floor for questions. Before we do that, we really encourage the questions to be direct, and follow-up questions will not really be allowed. And before stating your questions, please tell us about yourself briefly, where you come from and what's your name is. Questions. So we are going to take 2 to 3 questions at a time. So,
Perfect. Should I stand up or is this fine? Okay. Hey, my name is Zain Ali. I'm currently a graduate student at Columbia. I'm doing a master's in civil infrastructure. I'm excited to be here at John Kennedy School or Harvard Kennedy School. Anyway, so my question is, thank you so much for your presentation. It was fantastic. So question is, which platform do you believe would be effective for us to speak up and actually make a change? The current political agenda of the United States does not allow for the growth of Afghanistan and the inclusion of women. Protests typically work when there's a willingness to change at the higher level, and we haven't seen that. With you being the previous ambassador and not being there anymore, there isn't a voice for Afghanistan. So which platforms do you believe are effective for us to speak beyond just protesting? Thank you.
thank you for your question. We'll take
Hello, thank you so much for being here and for all the great insights. My name is Jasmine. I was born and raised in Germany, but my parents are from Afghanistan. And I'm studying government and economics at the college. And you already talked about some challenges that you faced as a woman in all those positions, like whether that was like deputy foreign minister or as the first woman ambassador, which is very impressive, by the way. And I would like to know if you have any advice for young women who want to work in that field in the future, of how to tackle these challenges, how to be taken seriously by male co-workers, and how to even enter these spaces with so many barriers, especially like in the case of Afghanistan.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. My name is Bahar. I'm a first year at the college. I'm from Iran, but pretty similar circumstances. I'm curious to know, how can we truly leverage the law to create change, given the fact that there are actors who won't even accept the term of gender apartheid or even explore it. And that just is a case that, or just an example of all the cases that or I guess just across the globe. So yeah, I'm curious to know how the law can really be leveraged to create that change.
I think to your question, the platforms. Look, there are inside Afghanistan already brave women. I have to say, not brave men. There have been no single man to accompany Afghan women when they're demonstrating. But there are brave women in Afghanistan who are demonstrating in the face of Taliban. So that is a source of strength for so many of us who are outside, and we can tap on it, but cautiously enough, because I always say those who are inside the country will be the one who will face the risk of the arrest and torture and truly kidnapped and killing as well. I say we live in the 21st century, and the younger generation today makes the majority of the population globally. And it's a very interconnected world compared to 22 years ago when Taliban first came to power. The world was more, not isolated, but the world was less connected to the technology revolution. So my call is, look, there is a benefit to democracy, despite so many criticisms we may have. There's a benefit to democracy, which is when the public demand really dictates the decision by the policy up high. Correct. So I think that's an important way to move forward. The second is also, it is a time that we do need stronger multilateral systems. And UN is an important partner, despite we have a lot of criticism, and I do have my own criticism of the United Nations and how it functions and how it needs to be revived and changed. But at the end of the day, it is a very important institution. And the more we provide strength to the United Nations, I think it will be better for countries like Afghanistan, where in the midst of no political interest right now, no capital is interested to engage in Afghanistan. Your argument is correct. So I will say, utilize the use of technology, connection with the youth, and then larger our campaign calling for stronger UN and effective UN engaging in Afghanistan, and pulling really the domestic political leaders to channel policies in Washington to be effective. So that's probably I will recommend. Coming into your question in terms of lessons learned or what could be an advice. I mean, I am a strong believer. You heard me, I spoke about education so much. So I think education is an important pillar. That's number one. And number two, I think no matter what, I have to say, no matter if you work in Germany, if you work in Europe, if you work in the US, if you work in the Middle East, if you work in Afghanistan, you work in India, at the end of the day, wherever you go, there are barriers, right? And I think barriers, a lot of them is just because the old way worked for men so effectively that they don't want to change it anymore. To me, the effective mechanism was, as I mentioned earlier, it was really building allies within the system, which was usually women. And then also finding male allies who think the same like us. There will be constant intimidation from their side, because they will be intimidated in assuming when you come, you are going to take their job. But the more you start to build and express your competency to your work, I think that creates and paves the path. And I think the last will be, don't act like what the majority expects you to do. Because I always say, if you act, the majority expects you to, you have to go against the current. Because usually that's where the challenge arises, is that the majority expects you to act like them, and the majority of the men. And if you started to act like them, then you're going to be part of the larger group who bans or stops women from coming in. So go against the curve and stand tall and strong, and I think fight it hard. Yeah, no easy answer. And Bahar, coming to your question, the case of Iran as well, and I would say honestly, if you look into Central Asian countries, things are not as great as we think either. If you look into our other immediate neighbor, Pakistan, the same thing. Things were just changing, not in a good way, and how to take advantage of these international mechanisms. We are in the midst of doing it, and it has been really, really hard. As I said, member states completely walk away and say we can't even use the term gender all the time. But I always say, look, you can go to the lowest bar because it's acceptable. I always say hold the highest bar and then also work with what is available. So in the case of the legal mechanisms, if gender apartheid does not exist yet, but there is gender persecution, which is part of the law. So our push is, okay, this exists, let's file a case. We did file a case. And then our sort of pushes, let's bring it to the justice system and just get a hearing for it. And I think it's persistence, you know, not giving up. And the true power really lies with the younger generation. I think it's a very unfortunate story that where we live today, I mean, there is a beauty of technology, the type of changes it made, but there is also the negative impact. We have become more isolated compared to what it was before. I think our source of information is very limited in the sense of like what is channeled to us. So to me, I say, you know, this is the moment of revolution. The younger generation need to sit together, need to connect with each other, need to find to pull the values, because I'm telling you, there is a fall back on values per se. That's it. If it's human rights, it's the principle of democracy. If it is women's rights, it's a complete regression in all of them, and it's scary sign. When I came to in 2019, you are it's recorded, but I think it's a good thing now I'm in academia and I can say what I can say. And I used to not be able to say this. When I came in 2019, I came here in 2004 and I was here until 2013 and I moved and then I came back in 19. It was a change in this country. I could not recognize it. I talked to my professors and I said, what happened? Right? And that change is happening everywhere. And it's scary. It is really, 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 really scary. Because look, for me, I grew up in darkness, but when I hold on to the probability of change and liberal education, I really valued it, and I believe in those values until today. I still, despite there was a complete fall on every level. I think it's a complete collapse of square one of what 22 years was. We went back to the same stage, but I'm still not giving up on democracy. People tell me like, and people tell me with great institutional experience and background, they say, well, Afghans rejected democracy. And I say, no, that's a wrong statement you make. We did not reject democracy. The type of structure that was created for us, it was not fitting. So it was not really the democracy that we rejected. It was the type of democracy that was imposed on us. So I think that it's you all, you're really the bread and the butter of policies that will be crafted and created, and your voice matters, your thinking matters. And I'm telling you, out there is not an exciting place, and it's getting worse.
My name is Sarah, and I'm a mid-career student here at the Harvard Kennedy School. I share the same nostalgia you share from Boston. I came here in 2000, and I also share the same school. I went to Simmons College. And even though we come from different backgrounds, but I also share like the challenges I had to face for my family to send me abroad. And I chose Simmons because it's an all-girls school. So it's very strategic. But I graduated a year after you joined. Okay. So I graduated in 2000. So my question today, I work for UNESCO, so I am part of the UN community, and we have been doing a lot of building awareness, sharing the voice of Afghan women, and recently for the International Women's Day, we are launching a documentary, Her Education Our Right, sharing stories of different female who struggle and face challenges. And today my question is, what more can we do at the international level? What, because we have the convening power of bringing countries together. So what more can we do
Yes.
to ensure that we don't leave the Afghan women struggling, especially after, some of them were born and they were like these 20 years and then they're moving like backwards. So my question is, what can we do? Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Sean. I'm Kurdish from Iraq, and growing up my teenage years, I was following all of the news that was happening in Afghanistan. The two invasion happened around the same time, so and I'm a gender-based balance specialist in conflict zones. What I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that when you go and talk to people, they're like, well, this is what the community wants, this is what the culture wants. I just wanted to learn more about how you push back against it and how do you respond to them? Because there is this notion of recognizing Taliban as the formal authority of Afghanistan. And this means that basically legitimizing whatever is happening to women and girls and men as well in Afghanistan. So I would appreciate if you could give us some pointers on how you push back against it. Thank you.
There was one more.
Hello, Ambassador Adela. Thank you for your speech. My name is Nirja. I'm a mid-career professional with 15 years of working, and I work in a sector which is very male-dominated, which is logistics, transportation. So, going back to what you said a while ago on leadership. So I increasingly see that women are compelled to behave like men as you go up in the ladder. Your traits of intuition or empathy or bringing people together are not really valued, and you are asked to behave like them, talk like them, wear clothes like them, I don't know. So what's your advice on keeping that balance, those are really, really valuable traits. And some men realize it, but majority, they don't. And even some women perhaps feel the same way, but they go along with the current. So what's your view?
This is probably our last question because we are running out of time.
There's one more question here.
Thank
you.
Hi, my name is Mara Bolis, and I'm a CID fellow this year, and so excited to hear you speak, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a related question. Something that I've been thinking a lot about is how do we galvanize men to be more part of this conversation, but from this perspective of what benefits men. So my thought is, how do we invite more men into care work and into spending time with their families, right? I'm sort of, Sheryl Sandberg said, lean in. I feel like we all have to lean out. I don't know how realistic of a proposal it is to look from that dimension. I understand that I live in Boston, I have a very particular view, but it just feels like there's a corollary that's necessary. We've been so invested in women's leadership, and that's right, and women's progress, and that's right, but isn't there sort of a corollary shift in terms of inviting men into more from a care standpoint that can benefit them and enrich their lives?
Okay, we'll take one more question.
Hi, my name is Zara Berry. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. My question is around the Taliban regime. So basically, we know that they are in control right now, and some people say that they have changed, some say that they haven't changed. My question is that what are some risks and opportunities in engaging with them? Because of course, it's been 3 years, they're controlling the country, and some countries have recognized them, some haven't, and we don't know for how long they're going to be there. But I'm trying to think about ways how to engage with them, how to negotiate with them, and how to ask them the right questions that, okay, we respect you, but what can we do for girls? Like, why is there like a ban on girls' education? Why do we have to pay the cost of the war, the cost of the things that they want to do? So I just want to know what's your view on that.
Sure. I'll take one.
I think let me this time start with the last question.
Listen, on the issue of Taliban, trust me, there was a lot of innovative and creative thinking, trying to find ways on how to influence them and how, as you said, engage with. And there is a lot of formats now created to engage with them, to convince them. So that's going on. It has not stopped, it's moving forward. But what as a society and as women we know, and knowing them from even 22, 24 years ago, look, they simply do not, it's not the belief, they're afraid of woman power, right? So this logic, it's not about even women and girls being educated in the right format or space, like, only girls school, only female teachers, not, very conservatively dressed. It's not even that. I think it's the logic. And then there is also this discussion of going back and forth, the changed Taliban versus the not-changed Taliban. It's a system that really the authority comes from the top. And the people who stay at the top of the authority, like one individual at this moment, and then there is the next one really in the line. If something happens, the next one will go in, and he is not different than the current leader. So basically expecting that the mentality will be changed in next 4, 5, 6 years, not really. Because those who are really at the top and has the authority to decide on the degrees, they're not connected to the rest of the world. They're really in their own space and isolated spot, and they truly believe in darkness. So it's really, do we expect a revolution there? I don't think so. That's going to happen, right? So what is the hope? I think it's really hard to think of any possible hope. But my only hope is really we find, like I say, there's a parallel pressure, there is a parallel engagement, whatever that could be in that direction. But we have to find alternatives, because without alternatives we can't live. It's, as you said, it's 3 years. For 3 years, girls have not been able to go to school. And I couldn't go for 5. This time it could be 7, it could be 4, it could be 10, 9, who knows? But this time passes by, and forced marriages are arriving, and they're all impacted. So a change through them. Coming to your question, I think, look, that pressure is always there. And I will tell you a story. When I first joined as a deputy spokesperson at President Karzai's office, I was the only young woman, and there was one woman before me, and we would be at the leadership meetings among male colleagues. And one day she told me, and she said, well, you know what? President Karzai really respects me, and he's telling me I'm more like a man. Right? And to me, me naive coming from the US and completely dressed like a feminine, like more feminine than today even, because now I can't afford to have high heels. Then I could do high heels and all nail polish and everything. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I would be very insulted if you told me that, because I want to keep my feminine part of me who I am. And I think that conversation with her even pushed me more to remember or to realize that who I am and how much I'm going to make an impact for the rest of the younger girls in the palace at the time. So I continue to wear my high heels, my feminine clothes, my bright colors all the time. And what I wanted to say is that since we are aware, at this moment, I think we are aware those women who went before us. Some of us have a complaint and saying they do not support other women. And my argument is they really they fight for the space they have gained, and the majority are men, and the men are pushing them to act like them, right? And since we are aware, we should not act. I think it's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, but at the end of the day, that game is winnable. It's hard. As I said, being the young woman with high heels walking, we were once in a delegation visit with the president, and we were all walking, and the president is walking, the delegation is following him. And then I have high heels. I'm the only one where the heels make sound. And then every 10 steps, the president looks back, and I'm like, yeah, it's me. But he walked. And then we walk, and then he looks back, and I'm like, yeah, it's me, keep walking. And I didn't change my heels. So, and this is like a very simple story of peace, but I think it's a more of like being aware that pressure is there. And I think
friendship, good colleagues, mentorship, consulting others, and building that allies. I think, you need female allies wherever they are, across sector, build it up. And I think in your question, childcare, this whole debate is so important and critical that a lot of women, when they come to leadership, because of their children, they cannot pursue and continue. And I think it's really unfortunate in this country that you don't have any childcare system. So having male colleagues to be in the room is extremely important, that for sure. But I think it's time in the US that this debate needs to come up. Where is the childcare system for women? And a lot of, I always say the reason I could do what I'm doing is because of my mother. It was my mom who took care of all of my children. So there was a time I had somebody interviewed me in Kabul, and then the article's title was, "Behind every man, there is a woman, and behind every successful woman, there is another woman." And I think it's true, because it's a difficult environment. And let me come first to your question. Coming to UNICEF, this is the best question you ever raised. Listen, to me, I feel that, I am a strong supporter of multilateralism in the UN. And then there's one thing that is really critical that has not changed yet. I think the UN needs to connect to the new world that they have not connected yet. And I think with UNICEF in the education sector, one thing I humbly request, and I really hope that I'll have follow-up meetings with your colleagues and you, because there are ideas. You need to integrate technology to the curriculum. Because at this moment right now, schools are banned for girls, and girls cannot go beyond 6th grade. And all of your work is right now up to 6th grade. And I say, look, come on, you can't just give in and say, fine, Taliban, you asked me up to 6th grade, all my resources will now go to the 6th grade. No, I think there's a lot of innovative thinking. I will tell you, how we can bring the curriculum online and then create spaces for girls to be educated. And UNICEF needs to really take the lead in it. Ad hoc Afghans have done it. Nonprofits have done it already. They're already integrating technology, AI to their education system, and just to educate girls at home. But UNICEF is still the old school. So I think that's where it would be, and I would love to follow up with you and have the conversation. And your question was on the.
It's the culture, this is how they want it done,
Okay.
we're not gonna interfere.
This happens a lot, and one of the biggest mistakes that I always say it happened in Afghanistan post 9/11 was really the thinking when the Constitution was built. When the Constitution was built, and probably Fatma remembers those days, we had a couple of people that came from abroad, and I was a young girl working at the UN, and I so clearly remember them, and I know them too. So I talked to them after that. The whole argument at the time was, well, Afghanistan needs a constitution. The president the power should be in hands of the president. So meaning a centralized system needs to be established, but constitutionally. Because it's a traditional country that has been always ruled by a king. So because of that, they cannot have a diversified power structure. And that was exactly what the mistake was made. Because we had changed, we had moved, we had the younger generation, there were women, it's a very multi-ethnic country. So I always say it was not because we rejected the democracy, the type of democratic structure created for us, which did not succeed. It's a battle that we haven't won yet at this moment. We're still fighting it. We still have some of the same people are still in power in different entities and different spots. They're still the decision maker in a policy level outside of Afghanistan. Some part of the Afghan, former leaders as well. We're still fighting it. I still have not this won the battle. That this is the way how we do it. This is the way it's supposed to be done. This is how it succeeded. And constantly, it's more than 40, 50, 60 years now we're in war. And those thinking did not work. So the question is, how many more times we have to test those ideas? It did not work, it failed, it's a new country, it's a new world. How do we go back to what
thousands of years things were done, and even thousands of years. I mean, that's why I started this story with my grandmother. Come on, don't tell us that Afghan women were always, you know, the way Taliban are treating them. No, my grandmother was like, nobody could say anything, even her husband could not say anything to her. But forget about the brothers and her kids. So that's not true. That's not true at all. And we're still saying it in many platforms. We want to challenge it. We have challenged it in different ways, but at least my hope is this time, and I think this will be another failure. If there is a moment of pause and there's a new chapter in Afghanistan, I really hope we do not rely on what we did before. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for your valuable time and your sharing your profound insights of Afghan women and the challenges they are facing. Next, we have a career roundtable with Ambassador Raz. It's starting at 1:15 in the Perkins Conference Hall, which is on the 4th floor of Rubinstein Building. And before that, before you guys leave, please remember to compose the plates and spoons in the glasses. The compost is right over there.